this August is the 30th anniversary of her death.
30 years is a long time for a family to wait for justice, especially when the victim of a gruesome murder is your daughter or little sister.
One of the saddest things for me as a parent, losing a child at 15, is that you're thinking she never had a chance to make her mark.
We see people on the streets and in the movies that remind us of her, that look like her, and you wonder what she would have looked like.
The murder happened August 13, 1978 at the north end of Torrey Pines Beach. 15-year-old Barbara Nantes and her 17-year-old boyfriend Jim Alt were savagely attacked as they camped overnight in sleeping bags on the sand. It's still painful for the victim's mother and two sisters, knowing the killer was never arrested.
That was the worst part about it, is thinking whoever it was still out there.
The autopsy report spells out in brutal detail how Barbara Nantes died. Blunt injuries to the head, strangulation, lacerations. She was found nude, spread eagle on the sand. The killer apparently used a knife to sever the girl's breast. Barbara's boyfriend was beaten unconscious and barely survived the attack. With no suspect in sight, the days turned into decades.
I gave up hope of them finding the killer a long time ago.
30 years after Barbara Nantes' murder, the public is finally finding out about evidence that connects that crime to another murder that happened on this same beach in 1984. Another teenage girl with strikingly similar injuries. 14-year-old Claire Huff was found dead at Torrey Pines Beach 6 years after the first murder. She, too, had been beaten and strangled, her body mutilated. This time, the victim's entire left breast had been amputated with a knife.
Claire was visiting with my mother, who lived in Del Mar.
Rhode Island resident Sam Huff is Claire's father. His daughter was in San Diego in August of 1984, staying at her grandparents' house near Torrey Pines, when she decided to take a short walk to the beach, alone, around 11 o'clock at night.
She bought cigarettes at the convenience store and proceeded onto the beach, and I think was sitting there smoking a cigarette when she was assaulted.
Those cigarettes may now be the key to solving both cases. Police found DNA from 3 unidentified females and 2 unknown males on cigarette butts at the scene of the 1984 murder.
That's interesting to us because we do believe that Claire Huff was with a group of people shortly before she was murdered.
San Diego Homicide Lieutenant Terry McManus says there are other key pieces of evidence pointing to a single killer. Both girls were found on the same beach. The killer severed the breasts of both victims, and both girls had wet sand stuffed into their mouths.
The FBI tells us back in 1995 that there's a strong likelihood that the same suspect or suspects committed the murders.
News that the same killer may be responsible for both murders was first posted on the San Diego Police Cold Case website last year. It came as a surprise to the families of the victims.
I was shocked when I heard there was a similar murder in '84. We were never told.
I'm not sure why we weren't told. I would think it would have been in the public interest to let the world know.
Because there was no solid DNA evidence pointing to a single killer, police say the public was never told about the link.
Had that link or those similarities pointed the finger at a suspect or multiple suspects, we'd have a responsibility to make that public. That was not the case back then, and it's not the case today.
Detectives did question at least one suspect in Claire Huff's murder, a Torrey Pines neighbor named Wallace Wheeler, who reported finding the body to police. Wheeler committed suicide in 1988 by jumping off a downtown building, and detectives have since ruled him out as a suspect. Now, decades after the killings, the families of the victims are hoping someone who was on that beach will come forward to police.
You had to be some sick person to have done what this person did to both my sister and the other young girl.